The St. Louis Blues just sent a serious message after coming off a dominant win versus one of the top teams in the NHL, with key players stepping up. We're going to break down exactly what has flipped the script in St. Louis, with multiple things coming together, key players stepping up, and we also get a quote coming from Chris Pronger on Logan Mailloux that will have fans fired up. We're going to break down all this and so much more in this episode, and you're not going to miss it. So, Darius, let's just go straight into this today, where we've seen the St. Louis Blues had a rough start to start the year. Let's be honest here, but coming off a dominant win last night, looking at all the players stepping up. Listen, we're going to touch on the first line that did struggle a bit. Tyler Tucker almost off the graph with how good he played. What is your initial thoughts on this kind of performance that St. Louis Blues went out and kind of made a statement to the NHL that, listen, we're not only back, but we're going to be back better than ever?
Well, Pye, the first thing I noticed when I turned on the game yesterday is I thought it was a replay of a different game from last year because I was like, why are the Blues wearing their old jerseys? But they're now their third jerseys, and yesterday was a theme night. So back to their, I guess, third jerseys, whatever you want to call it, their old ones at this point. So that was a lot of fun, but big game from a lot of players. And Snuggerud and Suter continue to look good together. He gets another goal. A couple guys, and we got to talk about that first line. We will in a second, but Tyler Tucker certainly was not the problem. He had a great game, and Jim Montgomery is a huge fan of this player. So, like we were saying all last week and heading into this week, is it the defense pairing? Is it the defensemen themselves? Because we've seen Tyler Tucker before, right? And like we were talking about in our video yesterday, Kessel coming in is going to be able to stabilize that blue line a little bit, I think, where you're not running around as much, right? And listen, Mailloux will be just fine, and we'll get to him in a second. We've touched on him in videos before, but Kessel was going to come in, be able to stabilize this blue line a little bit, and this was going to be a big test for this team because Dallas, while not being undefeated anymore, coming into this game, we're looking like one of the best team, if not the best team in the entire league. So we knew this was going to be a challenge. They tightened it up defensively, right, which is a really, really good sign in this one. And not only that, your goal scoring comes through for you in by way of Jimmy Snuggerud and a few others as well. Now, we also have to talk about the first line, Mark, because that is something that probably can't stay the same. The blender has been thrown out there, right? The lines have been juggled around a lot. They're in the blender. Jim Montgomery, kind of talked about that heading into this game, that he thought it was important to do that well while still maintaining a few pairings that he thinks works, like Schenn and Kyrou and Suter and Snuggerud so far. They found some, chemistry so far this year. But that top line of Holloway, Thomas, and Neighbors, by all the advanced analytics, the eye test, all of these things, they were not very good last night. So maybe they needed another game to get going here. Maybe it's just a bad mix of, players on the line. Maybe they just don't complement each other well, which is interesting because they're great players, and you need Holloway to get going here. So what are your thoughts on that too, Mark? Because I think it's pretty interesting that line with so many skilled players didn't work out, but they are finding something throughout the lineup in these pairings that have been working.
I think the big thing is, too, listen, we're seeing a lot of these lines work. The third line looked great last night. We've seen the second line stand up. But I think the biggest issue with this is if your first line is out versus the top competition, yes, it's going to be harder. You're going to have them out against Mikko Rantanen type players. But I think the biggest issue is if you have three line that's working. We've seen it work last night. We've seen the score sheet. People were out there just firing on all cylinders. We'll touch on the defense, but I think the biggest problem now is Jim Montgomery looking to say, hey, three lines have worked with this group. We've seen all three of the bottom lines work. So maybe we leave the first line to let them figure it out. We know how good Robert Thomas can be. We know how good Jake Neighbors and Holloway are. So having them together, maybe something will click, but I think you give them one more game. This is a game that they came out and made a statement. They won a huge game versus the Dallas Stars. We're seeing a lot of the leaders, and none of these guys are Robert Thomas. So maybe once he gets into his groove, maybe he just needs to get ready and stay with a couple players instead of having these mismatch lines going through all season. I'm in the belief that this top line can still be very good for the Blues. We've seen how good they all are individually. So Darius, kind of throwing it back to you before we kind of get into this whole defense and how it looked outstanding. What is your thoughts on maybe just leaving that top line for a couple of games? If they're getting wins, that's fine, but you need them to get going, but I wouldn't shake it up just yet.
Yeah, I would agree with that, right? I think that you have to start to, look at it, certainly, because it didn't necessarily work last night, but it doesn't mean it's not going to work again. But the team won, and the other lines, like you said, did look good. So, sometimes I like to play devil's advocate, but for this one specifically, I won't, because it makes all the sense in the world. They should run this lineup again in their next game, see how it plays out in that one. and then you take it from there, right? They didn't necessarily look good, but these are great players that could potentially figure it out together. And Neighbors has had a hot start to the season, so maybe he needed a game to cool down a little bit and somebody else take over. It was also nice because, we were talking on the channel about how Kyrou being moved to the third line while still being with Shen was, looked upon as a demotion. It was nice to see him get on the board too, and he scores that goal. So that was really good to see. So yeah, I would run this back one more time, kind of see, where it takes the team and how some of the lines are playing still. Because if you have a couple lines that are working, I'm not saying to sacrifice a line. You obviously want to find synergy throughout your lineup, but at the same time, they won. A couple of the guys look really good. Run it back one more time, especially with that defense core.
And I think that's the biggest thing. Listen, the defense last night was great. I mean, Tyler Tucker almost breaking the score sheet when you're looking at advanced stats. His individual defense was a little down, but every other metric was insane. I think the biggest thing is, and listen, fans are going to look at this in two different ways. We're going to get into the Pronger quote and everything on Logan Mailloux as well. But I think the big thing is fans are going to look at this and say, hey, maybe Logan Mailloux is the problem. And I don't agree with this. Logan Mailloux is still a very young player that needs to find his footing. But I think the issue with this now is after seeing how good that third pairing did play, I don't think you can break this up. We know how good Parayko and Fowler have been together. We've seen Falk and Broberg, as much as fans aren't the biggest fans of Falk, but we've seen them work in the past. And of course, Tucker and Kessel look phenomenal. Darius, this is one of these situations. Once again, do you think they can break these pairings up to get Logan Mailloux in? Or do you think they'll kind of just let him sit in the press box, get his game? We've seen him working on extra ice time. What is your thoughts on the situation with the defense right now?
I don't think they're rushing to get Logan Mailloux back in the lineup at this point. I think that eventually he will. And Jim Montgomery said that they're going to be working with him. And once he comes back into the lineup, the hopes is that he will never come out of the lineup. He'll just be a regular and things should be fine. I'm not going to say it's not going to be anytime soon or anything like that, but I think they're comfortable right now. They know what they have in Matthew Kessel. It's early in the season still. They're going to continue to work with Mailloux. So for the time being, I don't see him in the lineup, but I think when he is ready to make that jump back in, they're hoping that, some of the things that they need to iron out, they're going to do that through practice and some of the, go through the systems and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to monitor how that looks, but he is going to be in the press box for a bit still, I think at this point. Let him watch. And, a good game to let him watch yesterday from the press box, right? The team looked pretty good. So I think it's still going to be a bit, but again, I don't want to say, we won't see him anytime soon or anything like that, but it would be a mistake, I think, at this point right now to put him back next game or something like that.
And I think the big thing is, and listen, Chris Pronger says it perfectly, you can't find a comparison for these guys. Go check this article out, by the way. It's going to be down in the description. But going into the quote, you can't compare Bolduc to Mailloux. Never going to find a comp there. It's not why the trade was made. They're looking at a roster. They're looking to fill the hole in the roster. And we know the biggest thing with the St. Louis Blues was getting younger on defense. You have a lot of guys in the OHL or even the AHL that are young. Juracek looks great. Steinberg's another player ready to make the jump at some point. But I think the biggest thing was finding a player that's right on the cusp of making the jump, and that was Logan Mailloux. I mean, going back to the pairings, where we've seen like Nick Leddy even last year, an older player on the back end. Torrey Krug is obviously out with an injury, and his career is probably over at this point. But I think the new wave of younger defensemen joining the Blues team is what they're looking for. I mean, Darius, just real quickly, looking at this quote, do you agree with Chris Pronger that you can't compare this? Yes, Bolduc was a guy that went out and had a very hot start. I'm pretty sure looking at the lines on Puckpedia just earlier on, he's down on the fourth line now due to injuries. But what is your thoughts on just the non-comparison, which I do totally agree with?
Yeah, I get it. I get it from the Blues fan side of things. Some of the fan base is saying, look at Bolduc over there. He's putting up a bunch of points to start the season. Wouldn't that be nice on the Blues, especially with the Blues, kind of struggling out of the gate, right? I get it, but that's not why you made the trade. I 100% agree with Chris Pronger. You saw a hole in your lineup. You needed to get younger and you needed more skill on the back end. You have to make a trade. And with guys like Jake Neighbors and, you're full on the wings. If you look at the Blues, you are full on the wings and you have a guy like Justin Carbonell coming up at some point. So you had an opportunity here to get a very skilled offensive defenseman that has size, that doesn't shy away from the physicality of the game, especially at the AHL level. He's going to figure it out at the NHL level, but to compare him every time Zach Bolduc scores a goal, you are going to drive yourself crazy. They're not the same player. They don't play the same position. It's going to be fine. And I think that, it's going to look even better a couple of years from now that they made that trade now, especially when, Carbonell comes up. But you're full on the wings for the time being, right? So I think it made a ton of sense. And I totally agree with Chris Pronger. Like, you cannot compare it apples to apples. It's not, right? So we'll leave it at that.
And I think the big thing is too, even Dvorsky ready to break into the NHL at some point. Carbonneau is probably going to join this team. Looking at Duke going in on needing a contract at the end of the year, it made no sense to pay him as a second or first line player and play him on your third. Now, I mean, Jordan Kyrou is doing this right now, but hey, it's working for the St. Louis Blues. They got younger. But what's your guys' thoughts on all this? What's your thoughts on the statement win versus Dallas? What is your thoughts? Who do you think is stepping up the most? Let us know down in the comments. And speaking on comments, let's go right in the comments today, coming from Bobin Man. And the big thing is, let's go Blues. And I think we can all agree with this. So go spam, let's go Blues down in the comments. Get the vibes high around this team. And you can be featured on comments of the day. While you're down there, leave a like, subscribe, share this with your friends. We're back another episode, so keep your eye for that. But I've been your host, Mark, with my co-host, Darius. Go give him a birthday shout out as well. It is his birthday today. But that'd be it for this episode, and let's go Blues.